Hey Charles, how's it going?
Hey Jason, how are you? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got the finger injury there.
I thought you were getting microchipped.
Yes, via finger. It's just a small injury requiring a compression thing there. But Charles, we're going to be talking about things stolen straight out of Africa.
Yeah, again, the art department is magnificent. It's really outdone itself. I love the actual movie Out of Africa, and I think I've told you, but maybe I haven't told our viewers, that when I was in college, I actually spent a fair amount of time in Africa, in West Africa, in East Africa, later in South Africa, and after that in North Africa as well.
Wow, so and the four corners of Africa.
Not the deep interior as yet, and through it I have a healthy respect for even these many four plus decades later. What I saw in the African continent just as a tourist and student is there's great beauty and also great trauma that sadly, after lots and lots of money having been spent by the United States, by the UK, France, Germany, former colonial powers, multilateral organizations, across the great continent of Africa, there's a lot of despair, even now. And so thoughtful people across the political spectrum should be asking ourselves, how do we learn from this? And is it past time to make an example of Bill Clinton and his do-gooder daughter, and we won't characterize Hillary, and the cronies around them? Is it past time to make an example of people who would do what the Clintons and so many others do, and that is slap a cover of a starving African kid on top of a fundraising appeal letter and power it out over the internet and other ways, and you'll get hundreds of millions, billions of dollars sent to your care. And then because there is no easy way, even for a well-run charity, which the Clinton Foundation certainly is not controlled or well-run, there's no easy way to keep track of the complex accounting when you collect money in hard currencies and you translate it to soft currencies, and you're funding operating costs and offices all over this big continent where there are no roads and there really isn't enough electricity, so it's tough to get around. There are fewer roads, fewer railways, fewer airports. It is a prescription for corruption and disaster. And the worst part about it is somebody like Bill Clinton, who claimed to be, and people around him lauded him as, quote, America's first black president, which
that was offensive to me, and I'm not even black.
Are you sure?
Well, I'm part green.
Exactly. It's not easy being green.
It's not easy being green.
Yeah. But somebody like Bill Clinton, and indeed the Democratic Party used to have in this country an overwhelming percentage of African American voters.
And you know the famous Lyndon Johnson quote, right?
May not.
He said, "We'll have those N-word voting for us for 200 years."
Yeah, that's really not good. And
Lyndon Johnson was an evil, terrible guy.
Right. Well, Bill, I think he comes across in theory. He's able. He doesn't come across like Lyndon Johnson did, but for what Bill Clinton and Chelsea, frankly, and Hillary and others have done to divert hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars out away from still suffering victims across the African continent, racked by all sorts of political and economic problems, despite having immense riches in terms of arable land and forests and natural resources, whether oil and minerals. It should be seen as a case study in how to turn a land of great potential into a complete shit show. And for this Shai-Tholi show, yeah. And we bring this up because it is such a dramatic story and there's so much detail to talk about. We bring it up with due reverence for Martin Luther King, whose holiday is celebrated on Monday.
And he's a reverend.
But we do, at least I think both Jason and I have abiding affection for people of all ethnic and other backgrounds. And it really is a crying shame that Africa today in 2019 would be where it is, little changed from where, where things were back when I first went there in 1975.
Huh. Yeah, definitely a hotbed of corruption. You know, Charles, I think a lot of people are wondering why. Everyone at this point basically knows that the inspiration for these graphics is usually coming from the brainchild of the great Ortel, but for some reason you've chosen to have Bill and Chelsea. Why Chelsea?
Well, Hillary was in theory preoccupied being a senator and then Secretary of State and then running for president. And Chelsea's official story is that she was reluctant to get involved in the foundation. Mm-hmm. She did pursue her graduate studies and only became actively involved starting around 2010 and 11, charging in to, among other things, economic development projects, principally across the continent of Africa. And there's one school of thought that she doesn't care about money. That's the official, her narrative. Right. I don't care about money. Chasing money is beneath me. That's why I married.
Well, it's all right there at her feet.
That's right. That's why I married Mark. He's in charge of losing your money. He does a great job for that.
He doesn't care about money either.
He doesn't. That official narrative just doesn't hang together for me. Particularly, most people can be happy-go-lucky about money, particularly if they grow up rich. But when they start having children, and they start, as they now have two, and they start realizing just how expensive it is to keep up with the Joneses, particularly here in Manhattan, where the Clintons, frankly, are not all that wealthy compared to the billionaire class that is, leading the way things are done here.
Even now, though, you mean they certainly have hundreds of millions of dollars,
but that's not billions, many billions. I mean,
that's a lot of dough.
It is. But I'm not buying, whenever you see a fundamental contradiction, Chelsea's really smart, Chelsea's really principled, Chelsea's vice chair of the crookedest foundation on the planet that's connected to a former president and a putative presidential candidate, it just doesn't hang together. You can't be that oblivious and then take pride in something that is this crooked without being essentially crooked.
Right.
In my view.
I agree with that view, Charles. And of course, you've prepared another great presentation for us today. Perhaps we should get to that and run through our normal body of, sharing the usual information with everybody.
Sure. So the basic premise here, the Clinton playbook and the scoundrels playbook for charities is a never-ending one. I haven't drawn a final conclusion yet on Bill Gates, but every once in a while he says stuff that to me is very troubling. And one of the things he has said, which is ridiculous, is that through the essentially through the efforts of his foundation and others, we'll be able to rid the world of poverty, rid the world of natural disasters.
I thought you were going to say black people. That seems to be what Bill Gates is interested in.
I wouldn't go there. But he, the challenge is that relative to whatever we humans may do on this planet, even dropping nuclear bombs does not compare to the destruction of a major league earthquake or a volcano or raging forest fires or whatever, or God forbid an asteroid coming out of the space and destroying a large swath of the surface of the earth. So we are going to be, so long as there are humans on this planet, we're always going to be dealing with unexpected suffering in the form of these natural disasters. Sadly, because all humans are necessarily imperfect, there's going to be corruption forever. The question is, how bad will it get? And when we look at this perplexing case here in Africa, when did he say that?
Yeah, well, I wasn't intending to interrupt you. I just wanted to point out that Bill Gates said something I found kind of troubling back in 2016, that Trump may be like JFK. And I think that reflecting on this now, basically 2 years later, I think there's a lot of depth to this comment. I think Trump is like JFK in his challenging of the deep state, but I hope that Bill Gates doesn't know something about the potential ultimate plan for Donald Trump that we don't know. because we don't want him to be too much like JFK.
That's exactly right.
Anyway, sorry, Charles.
That's okay.
Please carry on.
That's okay. So if we just go back to the...
Yes. Whoops.
Right. So Africa, as I say, is used as a poster child for fundraising appeals. And when you get together, today I gather is the beginning of yet another gathering in Davos of these World Economic Forum people who travel the world with 13 crackberries and are rushing from this meeting to that meeting to another meeting to this fancy restaurant to who knows what. It's very easy to just say Africa, and project. And next thing you know, you've got, something's going to happen. The World Bank's interested. The DFID department in the UK, maybe they've got some money, or the Germans will have money, or the Chinese will have money. You put these projects together, but lost in the shuffle is what's happening on the ground and how bad is the situation in Africa. People are, from a pure economic metric standpoint, people are fond of trying to sell the absurd idea that humans should chase equality of result, because that has worked, that really works very well nowhere. I mean, you don't go, for example, you don't pay a gigantic amount of money for a ticket on Broadway to hear really average people sing and dance. You want to see excellent this.
Exceptional.
Exceptional, the same thing. So you're driven towards distributions where you're going to have very few exceptional people and a lot of, not so good people. But the facts on the ground, in terms of the way in which infrastructure is distributed around the world right now, there's a chasm. It's worse than a chasm. It's worse than the Grand Canyon between. We're going to show you facts drawn from the CIA World Factbook and other places of just how desperately poor two particular countries are in Africa, as compared, which happen to be ones where the Clintons have been playing, in quotes, for too long, Ethiopia and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Just how undeveloped, economically speaking, those two countries are relative to a Germany, to a France, and to a UK. Now, why did I pick those 5 countries? Because in actual fact, Ethiopia's population alone and Congo's population alone are bigger than Germany's. And since Germany is bigger than France and the UK, these are 2 large collections of souls stuck in Africa with a lot of resources around them. But after all these decades of caring and too many decades of looting, frankly, these nations are still not standing up on their feet. And to think that they're going to be able to compete against a Germany, against a France, against the UK, for that matter, America or China or Canada, is foolhardy, unless one makes a commitment inside the country to some semblance of a rule of law under whatever system may evolve in those countries, and outside a commitment on the part of do-gooder institutions, be they governments and foundations, to not, as the Global Fund has put in $40 billion, to help Ethiopia and Congo stand on their feet. You're talking trillions of dollars, and we'll get into that. It's unlikely that people are going to reach a decision to ever want to put that kind of money into either of those countries, but we'll give you a sense in this presentation of just how afflicted Africa is in an absolute sense, of these 2 countries in Africa, and in a relative sense compared to the vanguards of unregulated globalism, the people of Germany, the people of France, the people of the UK, who so want to push the rest of the world into this unregulated globalism for who knows what good set of reasons.
Charles, I never met anybody from Ethiopia until I started visiting Washington, D.C. frequently.
There are a lot, yeah.
And I noticed that there were a lot of black people who had this particular type of British accent.
Right.
So I was asking them, where are you from? And so many Ethiopians are there in Washington, D.C.
And Somalis. Yeah.
Why is that?
I don't know. But I've never been inside Ethiopia. I just landed there the first time to East Africa. We landed, and the captain of the plane was getting a little...
Sniper fire?
Well, worse. We landed...
Children with flowers?
Worse, far worse. We landed at Addis Ababa airport, and they said, we would encourage you to get off this plane as quickly as possible, as the capital is under attack.
Jeez, that doesn't sound like an appealing offer.
No, it didn't say. So we go inside, and we're from memory, this was in February of 1977, and I think late January, early February, and we got inside, and there were all these soldiers running around with machine guns and then
Inside the airport?
Inside the airport, yeah. Not shooting at each other inside the airport, but running around hastily.
You got to go to Mexico for that.
Exactly. But it really was, I mean, obviously you remember things like that many, many years later, but driving and flying down into the airport, it really was quite beautiful. The landscape was quite beautiful. But anyway, we have a situation here with the Clinton Foundation, which has been, I think, the central vehicle for diverting hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars away from needy African and other lesser developed nation donors. This Clinton Foundation, this is our 136th video, I think, on the subject, has been at it. They remain at it. They're probably raising money during this broadcast. And time has now gotten to the place here where a large number of accountants, we have here the notorious firm of BKD, and Price Waterhouse, and now Cohn Resnick. We have lawyers, Simpson Thacher.
Tigers.
Bruce Lindsay at his law firm, and Richard Zoll at his law firm. Richard Zoll is a new name, but he's somebody who's very wrapped in with Ira Magaziner at the Clinton Health Access Initiative. There's a long trail of tears involving reports that he has had personal oversight. He's the corporate secretary of the Clinton Health Access Initiative, according to his bio, and he certainly knows better. He's chair of the Proskauer Rose law firm's health practice. I mean, unless he's pretending to be a lawyer and has never been to law school, he has to know, and his firm, Proskauer Rose, has to know that charity fraud is a very serious matter, particularly here in New York, where Proskauer Rose got its start. So there are a large number of people who've been involved with this mess since October 23, 1997. I'm ready to believe that many of the volunteers and the junior people, the starry-eyed college graduates and graduate students who may have gotten involved with these ventures over the early period, say in 2002 and afterwards, I'm prepared to believe that a large number of those people are actually good-hearted people who were disgusted by what they saw and slithered away from the Clintons and just don't want to get tied into this. But they're actually, courtesy of LinkedIn, and you're not going to get your names off the page because we have already taken down many, many names of people who are today connected to charities, to educational operations, to all, businesses. These are people who in coming days and weeks we're going to identify, and we're going to encourage people in the crowd to contact them and say, have you no shame? How can you stand at this point in silence and let the Clintons and the people who are involved with this Clinton Foundation continue to get away with, frankly, the financial looting and raping of a continent that has so much promise but so many problems in the form of Africa. This is really despicable stuff. And Bill Clinton has made a science, as has Hillary, of going to places. Utrice Lead brought this up, the head of, she's at Progressive Radio Network now. She has her own show, Lead Stories, but she was the former station manager of WBAI.
Oh, right.
And she and I certainly come from the opposite ends of the political spectrum on many issues, but on this one, we share the view that there's just an uncanny number of times that people with dark-skinned people tend to get the short end of the stick, and the Clintons tend to get the cash. And this is not the behavior. If you said that Donald Trump was doing this, Donald Trump and Ivanka and Don Jr. and Eric,
that would be the end.
Yeah, I mean, the place would be burning down right now. If you just said that they'd done it, say, in Haiti, but to say you're doing it, you go to Papua New Guinea, desperately poor, dark-skinned individuals sitting on top of very rich deposits of natural resources, a perfect con game. You get government of Australia and others to give money ostensibly to help the poor people of Papua New Guinea. It's a corrupt country, so they help you steal the money, and then you cut a crooked deal to give vast resources to your political donors, and they cut you backhanders to finance your political campaign and your lifestyle. You see this in Haiti, Papua New Guinea, across Africa, in India, and the common denominator is the victims are all dark-skinned people.
Well, Charles, we've got Pierrette Gagnon in the comments telling us that there's a lot of Ethiopian immigrants in Toronto, that they were refugees from the famine of the 1980s, which I remember from being a little kid. That was so publicized on television, the pictures of these skinny, like skeletal kind of kids with the big inflated stomachs.
That's horrible.
Yeah, I don't know much about what caused that or how or if it got solved, but I remember that being really heavily promoted to the extent that I had this kind of like ingrained image of Ethiopia being this like horrible place where everybody is starving and dying.
Right. Well, I think about it this way a little bit. I mean, this is a very cavalier contrast or comparison, but if you can imagine the days before air conditioning, you know, you didn't have a lot of people in America living in Arizona.
Yeah.
You know, in the desert, or you know, in the swamps of Florida and Louisiana, or you know, indeed in Southern California. I'm talking about in the days well before air conditioning. It just wasn't an easy place to live. And then on top of that, imagine the early days when there's no air conditioning, there's no electricity.
Yeah, no refrigeration,
no electricity, no roads, no water. Right. You know, and lots of bugs. Bad ones, you know, the ones that will not just bite you.
Sounds like Africa.
Well, I mean, that's Africa today, as we're going to show you, that there are vast swaths. People talk about, you know, it's great out there, great potential, and I don't disagree, it's great potential, but the investment, the scale of the investment required to provide the kind of, not even the material luxuries that you see here in New York or in Germany or France and the UK, the scale of the investment required is so much vastly larger than we're currently, quote, investing or granting in the form of aid. And the people are so desperately poor, so the temptation to steal is so large that, you know, it's very easy to see why we're in the position we're in. We have these lofty sounding multilateral aid organizations. Where are they all based? You know, they don't say, well, I think what we'll do is we'll go to Kinshasa and set up the World Health Organization where the problems are. No, we'll go to Switzerland, because that's where we get a dirty bank account, there's good skiing, the food is great, the catering's even better. You know, everyone loves to go to Geneva. I'm not going to go have my kids and, you know, family. There's no, you know, I don't want to be a founding member of the Kinshasa, you know, crocodile watching club or whatever they have.
They have crocodiles?
I don't know, crocodiles are on the Congo River. But, so, you know, there's a real, Donald Trump, one of the reasons I continue to be encouraged by what he's doing is this gigantic swamp that he's focused on is the swamp in Washington, D.C. In actual fact, the United States is a massive funder of the global swamp, whose principal headquarters is in Geneva, in Switzerland, where we have the World Health Organization, we have many multilateral organizations there. It has become sort of the go-to place for, I would argue, NGO corruption. And it's purposely, these organizations are set up to be outside any kind of effective regulation. So what better place to set up a gigantic operation to skim money away from the deserving, needy people around the world than to set it up in Geneva, in Switzerland. Mm-hmm. So if we go into the next slide, I see, Jason, you're up almost to 80,000 now.
Making progress.
Great. That's good. And probably more than 10 on Crowdsource too, is that right?
Yep. We broke 10,000 last week.
Very good. So to the new viewers and listeners, this is an approach here that's different, thankfully, than the debacle we witnessed recently in mainstream press with the embrace of the buzzword. We'll talk about that in a second. This is an approach and a conversation with you, the viewers, and I want to actually begin by thanking, I don't want to give the person's name out, but there was some person who corrected my assertion, and I was wrong about Deutsch. I thought I had saw an argument that he was 76, and I apologize to you, Don, he's only in his early 60s. So I got that wrong. Forgive me. But this is an effort here where what we try to do is provide analysis of issues that are, we think, pressing and important and that will come to light in the coming week. We are centered on this crusade here to expose the largest collection of charity frauds, actual frauds ever attempted in the planet that I know of. and to bring the perpetrators of these ongoing frauds to justice. That's our central focus. But we're trying to do it in a way where we build pressure on the mainstream media and on the government officials around the world. And the only way we can do that is to excite the interest of you in the crowd to listen, and thank you for listening to and watch our show. But more important, to take the time to send links of these shows around to people you think should watch them, so that we can build a grassroots effort where people start saying, hang on, you know, there's a lot of chatter about the Trump Foundation, and if they have a 2.6 million or whatever it is problem, they need to pay the penalties for that. In this thing, we are talking about declared revenues of $3.2 billion in the main Clinton Foundation. We're talking about hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars missing from the main Clinton Foundation. Beyond that, all the satellite, we're going to show you one today that's $40 billion in size.
Whoa.
Where some estimate that 2/3 to 3/4 of that $40 billion is stolen. Okay, yet the United States continues to support this. Well, we need to pay our bills, we need to bring our debts down. So this is an effort where we share with you our views in a consistent fashion. We try to keep it sometimes lighthearted, other times not so lighthearted. But at all times, what we do is we provide links so that you can go and follow up what we're seeing. You can study it at your heart's content, at your own pace. Jason has put together this fantastic playlist of all our videos together. I guess now, my God, just the table of contents of the playlist has gotten 16,000 views so far.
It's great.
It's amazing. So I would guess all of our videos are probably pushing on 2 million now.
I think we'd have to dig into the analytics to check that, but certainly people can go to the Jason Goodman YouTube channel, and the Sunday with Charles playlist contains all of the Sunday with Charles episodes, as well as all of the Charles Ortel is Closing In episodes. So it's a convenient way for people to catch up on any videos that they may have missed. And of course, you know, Charles, I always appreciate it when people sponsor the show by going to patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. A lot of people are talking about how we've really been out front revealing some of the little known facts about William Barr. Larry Klayman and I have spoken about it quite a bit. I'm even bringing things to Larry's attention that he was unaware of. And Kevin Shipp and I did a show on the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp last week, where people can go to patreon.com and see that. We really reveal a lot about Mr. Barr. So there's a lot to be learned from all of these shows. It's really amazing. And they don't cover any of this stuff in the mainstream news because they seem to have an agenda that's not necessarily aligned with our viewers' best interests.
That's right. Russia.
Yeah. A little crazy, but you know.
Yeah, so when
sorry, Charles. I almost forgot Twitter. People can, of course, follow you on Twitter. And if they want to send you messages or keep up with stories that you think are the most important of the day, they should go to Twitter and follow you at Charles Ortel. Very easy to find. You're 34.4. They've got you stalled, and me, they've been running in reverse again, 24.5K. I think it is important that people join us on Twitter. You can go to @CSTheTruth, and you know, a lot of people have told me that they're not getting announcements of our videos, and we saw last week we had something like 80 viewers on Sunday with Charles, which is consistently one of the most popular shows on Crowdsource the Truth. So I feel like something is being done to prevent people from necessarily watching the shows, and the more platforms they can connect with us on, the more likely it is they'll get the information.
Very good. Well, maybe we can go to the quick review here. We talked about BuzzFeed in general terms, but you know, really, if you go to the first link, you know, you're sitting there, I've never actually met editors at the mainstream press, but I've met them other places, and know some of them very well. You're sitting there last week, and somebody runs in with, you know, this gigantic, you know, bombshell report that Donald Trump personally suborned perjury, meaning suggested that Michael Cohen lie to a congressional committee. And wouldn't the first thing you'd ask as an editor be, okay, who published this? And the word comes back, BuzzFeed, and it's like one of those basketball games. I mean, forget it. It's ridiculous.
Well, I think you would want to at least know who their source was and what the evidence was. Right. I mean, one point that Lee Stranahan has brought up many times is that he doesn't make a judgment based on, oh, this is the New York Times, so I'll believe it, or this is BuzzFeed, so I'll disbelieve it. He goes on a case-by-case basis, and certainly if BuzzFeed came forward with a video or a hidden recording of Donald Trump saying that, it could be valid. The problem is they keep publishing these stories that are based on no evidence whatsoever.
Well, and then, I was asked to talk about this yesterday on RT, which I enjoyed doing, and the number of people, of useful idiots who jumped on it right away. Supposedly, CNN and MSNBC had 200 separate stories saying that Trump is gone. Of course, Dan Rather came out of the pickle jar, to try to say this is it. This is worse than Watergate. He's never seen anything as bad as this. And all these pompous idiots were jumping on the story. And really. You're really going to hang your hat on BuzzFeed at this point in time? And it made me wonder a little bit. If we go back to the slide a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit, yeah. Before hitting that link, if you think about the timing, we knew that the Women's March protests were geared up for Saturday, right? This story, I think, broke Thursday. So this was fodder. Was this story,
for them to yell about?
Right, exactly. It was just to give them some, I guess you wouldn't say red meat, some salad, to start yelling and screaming or whatever. Was this a setup, actually?
This was tofu for the masses.
Exactly.
Tempeh.
And I just, I think it is good, we could hit this link that Mueller's team did put the kibosh on the BuzzFeed story right away. And for that, I give them a certain amount of credit.
Well, you know what, Charles? I hate to be skeptical all the time, although actually that's not true. I enjoy being skeptical all the time. But the previous article said that, Giuliani is demanding that they reveal the leaker. If he would just watch Crowdsource the Truth, he would know that it's very likely Peter Carr, who is the press liaison in Robert Mueller's special counsel office, who had a lot to say about the inaccuracy of this report, which is a dramatic contrast to his usual, we have no comment. Unless you want to meet at Paul's over a coffee, don't bring your cell phone and don't record it.
Right. Right, but honestly, we start here thinking about the special counsel at all, right? And is having a special counsel a good thing or a bad thing? I think at this point it's a very bad thing. But then we start thinking about it's a bad thing because who does this guy report to? Is there really effective oversight of the special counsel at this point? Can there even be? And beyond that, you are innocent until proven guilty in this country. And our government authorities, Mueller and our mainstream Department of Justice and other branches of government have enormous power. Literally, they can bankrupt somebody if they want to.
Easily.
And so that power, in theory, has to be held in check. And if we see anything through this process, there's nobody holding the deep state yet in effective check for offenses which sure seem to me to be far worse, actually, than Watergate. When you weaponize the Department of Justice and the IRS and the CIA and the agencies against unfavored candidates, let's say, and then after the people speak in election against a duly elected president and duly sworn in president, when you think you're powerful enough to do that, then all I will say to that is that you're making my case that there's a massive problem. That's an extra constitutional state of being, and it needs to be fully exposed. Those who can bring themselves to think that this type of behavior is okay need to be called out for who they are, investigated, prosecuted, convicted, incarcerated, and a clear message needs to be sent. Beto O'Rourke doesn't get, as somebody who's never held a meaningful, high position for very long, he doesn't get to decide whether we in the United States are going to follow the Constitution or not, just because he may win a presidential election if he does. You absolutely swear an oath to uphold, preserve, and protect the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. You don't get the right because you win a congressional election as AOC or a Senate seat or the presidency to just say, maybe we won't follow the Constitution now.
Charles, what do we think about BuzzFeed like digging in and standing by the reporting?
Well, what choice do they have?
I don't know, but
yeah, I mean, they've got to just, they're praying for at this point they are praying for extra time and for something to bail them out of this story.
Well, I'm glad that the president reminded everybody that it was BuzzFeed that did the initial reporting on this dossier, in case anybody forgot.
And that's why I made the point about, BuzzFeed, really? I mean, it's got to be pretty bad when even Saturday Night Live, which I don't watch anymore, is mocking BuzzFeed at this point.
Oh, wow, that is bad. They definitely don't like Donald Trump.
And so then we have the story about this Russian escort. Not that story, actually.
Oops.
The one before it.
Yes.
This story was curious from the start. Apparently, this name, Nastya Rybka, I don't know how to pronounce it, and there she is in Abu Dhabi, I guess.
Is she a nasty woman?
Well, if you go down the story, I think in Russian it means something like stinky fish or something.
No way.
Keep going.
Russian hooker in Thailand was granted.
Yeah, little fish. There you go. Little fish. Russian escort going by the name Nastya Rybka, Little Fish.
But why would they arrest a hooker in Thailand? Isn't prostitution what Thailand is famous for?
I think actually just the fact that you would say that, the government over there has gotten puritanical and has been trying to change.
Oh, really?
Yeah, has been trying to change that image, exactly. But again, once again, we have something that's really odd. Who is this lady? She supposedly entrapped Oleg Deripaska. That name keeps coming up again and again.
There have been photos of her with Oleg Deripaska.
Right. But the point being, with this whole Russian narrative, I mean, it would seem to me that if you could say one thing about Special Counsel Mueller, when it comes to Russia, he can't seem to think straight, right? He was head of the FBI when we didn't discern what was actually going on with Uranium One or with the trucking company or with Anna Chapman. We obviously missed all the Clinton Foundation shenanigans. We missed what was going on in Skolkovo. We couldn't find the Tsarnaev brothers. And now we've made a muddle of relations between the United States and Russia over these allegations against Trump and supposed Russian collusion, which Mueller can't seem to find any evidence of. I mean, if there's one country in the world that's a problem for Mueller and his team, it would seem to be Russia.
So, Charles, here's a picture of her with Deripaska. And see, the thing that I find interesting is that there are some YouTubers who will take a picture like this, which is evidence that she knows Deripaska and has a seemingly very close relationship with him. But that doesn't mean that she knows anything about Donald Trump or what Deripaska is doing or up to beyond this photo. And certainly their relationship is worth exploring, but I think there's a lot of people that like to take an element of evidence like this and spin it into a much greater story. I would remind everybody that Oleg Deripaska was involved with the FBI in this very unusual operation where he apparently personally provided $25 million to the FBI as an individual, not even a citizen of the United States, according to Robin Gritz, to finance this operation to get Robert Levinson out of Iran. Now, it seems like there are people in the FBI who want him to stay there. Maybe even Barack Obama wants him to stay there. So Deripaska's on one side of this, Mueller and all of these kind of deep state style guys are on the other. They love to have these plans where they can wrap up all the people that they don't like in one conspiratorial thing. So I'm very curious to know more about this.
Well, Deripaska's name keeps coming up again and again and again. On the one hand, there are allegations that Putin didn't like him, and then there are allegations that now they're close again. But I think somebody with a clear head needs to go through this evidence. And when I see the same names popping up again and again and again in scandal after scandal after scandal, it begins to make my head spin. I would note as well that the one thing we can say about Deripaska, at least, is on that boat he was a scruffy.
I think that's like the fanciest boat ever or something. He's super rich from taking over aluminum. There was a whole thing, that video that we looked at where Putin was trying to get those aluminum guys to do whatever.
So this piece about Michael Cohen is lengthy, and we're not going to try to summarize it all here. This is, I think, by this fellow who has variously called himself Imperator Rex, and this is a new Skadden Arps piece. But what it points out is that Michael Cohen's father is of Ukrainian origin.
Oh, really?
And that Michael Cohen has been, through his father or father-in-law, has been involved patrolling in Russia, in the Ukraine for a long period of time, and has been close to this Viktor Pinchuk. We've talked about him before. Viktor Pinchuk is, I believe, married to the daughter of one of the former Ukrainian strong people, strongmen. And he has built a very large set of businesses around the world, but operating between Ukraine and Russia and elsewhere. He is the Pinchuk Foundation is a big contributor to the Clinton Foundation. In theory, at least they're named as such. And the Pinchuks and husband and wife were involved, have been involved in Ukraine, doing Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative projects going back as early as 2004, and that clearly in 2004 the Clinton Foundation had no legal authority whatsoever to be doing international work, let alone in the Ukraine, let alone with the Pinchuks. And this is, of course, at a time when Hillary Clinton was a senator. So, and then ultimately needing money for a re-election campaign, and then after that in her job as Secretary of State. So this is a tangled story here, and before we leap into it and say that anything that Michael Cohen may have done was done at the personal direction of Donald Trump, and therefore, you know, this is all Donald Trump doing bad stuff, it could far more likely to me that that through Cohen and his relationships, there could be Ukrainian and Russian bad elements that, you know, were doing all sorts of crooked things. And maybe Trump knew about it, and maybe he didn't know about it.
I tell you what, Charles, it's a story like this just causes me to think even more that people just need to view every single thing with the highest degree of skepticism. Perhaps being from New York, that's a little bit more of our, inherent nature. I think a lot of people who aren't from New York are maybe more easily fooled because a lot of people are trying to get over, if you know what I mean. But didn't Trump tweet something about keep your eye on Michael Cohen's father? So this is what he's talking about, I suppose.
I would guess so. And the other thing that this article points out, which is, I've seen this, that when you get to learn about really big people, what they tend to do, they don't see themselves as either Republican or Democrat. They're going to support both parties because one party is going to be in power temporarily, and you want to make sure you've got protection with both parties. So pundits who look at this and say, well, that person is obviously a right-wing XYZ and they can't possibly be right, or somebody else says he's a left-wing, he's an idiot, you're missing the point. What we're talking about here, where the right and the left should unite, is in a campaign against corruption on this scale. I mean, I may be very naive, I don't think I am, but that may make me even more naive than I am. But, when I think back to being a college student in the 70s and getting out of Harvard Business School in 1980, I don't think I know the United States was not as involved internationally as we now are. And I naively assumed back then that as the United States gained the upper hand, we would bring good governance practices and law and order to the international community, and the world would be a lot better off for that. Now, the United States has made many illegal moves around the world, continues to do that now. But that said, I wake up in 2019 and I ask myself, has the United States brought the world to a higher standard, or is the United States, mired in the swamp? Does swamp Trump, as it were, truth, justice, and the American way? And I think, you have to look at the evidence, 1988 to the present, and say, we have gone badly wrong as a nation.
I agree with that, Charles.
So then there's this excellent story here about the FBI basically working with Fusion GPS far more aggressively than has been known against Trump, basically. I guess
Didn't
this
we
is
know
from
this
True
already?
Pundit.
Didn't we know this already?
Well, it's now, we knew it months ago, but the point is we're now getting more and more confirmation that our worst suspicions are being proven true. And it takes a while. You know, speaking as somebody who tried to bring the authorities, make them aware of GE's problems in 2007, you know, it can take people a long time to realize what's truly going on right under their noses. And indeed, the longer a fraud is allowed to continue or a mistake is allowed to continue unpunished, the more likely it is for the government bureaucracies and officials to say, well, we can't admit that we missed this for 10 years. You know, so let's see if we could push it out a few more weeks until you get to a place where you have to admit it. And I think that's where we are now. We've been there for a while. We have a serious corruption problem in the FBI.
See, it's
And
interesting. It's interesting to see that the original report came from True Pundit, because when I was speaking with Michael Moore on More Pain the other day, he pointed out that a lot of the stories that True Pundit runs get to the mainstream like 2 years later. So I wonder how much of this that SGT report is putting out is just a rehash of what's already been out 2 years ago.
Oh, this original story came out 2 years ago? I don't think so.
Don't know. He's coordinated with Fusion GPS in 2016. I'll have to ask Michael Moore, but he's well ahead of this stuff. He's got, oh, maybe it was February 2018 that they were talking about this when Nunes expressed concern.
Well, I think this recent story is more about the fact that Orr, it's come to light that Orr actually vociferously warned many people, supposedly, that, you know, of the Clinton connections, of the political nature of the Steele dossier, and this is now finally coming to light officially. It's been, you know, this is the kind of stuff that they've been trying to hide and redact or whatever.
Great.
Yeah. This piece by Monica Showalter, next one down, should scare the living crap out of the Democrats. You know, the theory of the Trump, the narrative, that Trump's temper tantrum with regard to the wall is that it would damage his standing with Hispanic Americans. Instead, he's up 19 points.
Well, because he's talking about protecting their family members from coyotes and getting raped by making this illegal journey, by having a formalized legal process for immigrating.
Right, and I happen to know, as I'm sure we all do, a large number of people who have legally immigrated to this country, and these people, they go through a long wait, a tough vetting process. They cannot be prouder to have made the switches from whatever nationality to becoming an American. They did it the lawful way, and of course they know better than anyone else. Why should you do it the lawful way if you could do it illegally and jump the line? And it just doesn't make any sense. And of course, the large majority of people who are here, legal immigrants, are going to be very thankful to Donald Trump. And then beyond that, the community of people that is not at the top end, that's competing for these jobs. If you've got an illegal person inside this country and an unscrupulous employer, you can take advantage of these illegal people by paying them less, by not giving them benefits, by abusing them, et cetera. And they're not going to complain because they're here illegally.
Well, the process has created essentially a servant class. We've heard them say that restaurants couldn't carry on with that. So, I mean, you're basically saying without taking advantage of people who are risking their lives, risking rape and all kinds of things to come here, you wouldn't be able to have your restaurant be as inexpensive as it is?
It's rubbish. It's a rubbish argument. And it also, and I love the way when you try to debate people who would be on the other side of this issue, they look at you, you know, like you're in a high chair with baby food splattered all over your bib, you know, and they may wipe that stuff off your face, you know, if they decide it's worth, you know, explaining to you how stupid you are because you have a differing point of view. I mean, I don't view the people who are calling for open borders and eliminating ICE and after now decades of allocating funds for border protection, where did all that money go? And hearing reports of these people who are coming up, as you say, raping women along the way. I think it's an abuse to take a young child on that the trail up here in a caravan. That's incredibly abusive stuff. Particularly if you know, because I think you should know, even if you're stupid, that the official government position is you're not coming in. You're not breaking into this country illegally anymore. It's not happening. So
there's no group, Charles, that I've found that's more opposed to illegal immigration than, as you said, legal immigrants, because it's just the most unfair possible thing. Like in many cases, a lot of them had to pay lawyers
Right.
and work really hard and study and go through all kinds of stuff. And so, I mean, every single legal immigrant who I've spoken to totally supports what Donald Trump is doing. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So this is one I found in Politico. This next story here was actually, I'm amazed to see it in Politico, but somebody has done an analysis which makes sense to me, that says that actually switching to electric cars may be worse for the environment.
Why?
Well, the argument here, to boil it down, appears to be, I guess this is an older article, appears to be that the energy grid still is reliant upon coal and other, coal-fired plants.
Yeah.
Right. So if you hype demand for electric usage by creating all these vehicles, on the one hand, you're dependent on the grid. On the other hand, the combustion engine, the internal combustion engine, is a lot more efficient in 2019-18 than it was even 10 years ago. So the comparison, the mathematical comparisons are not necessarily as straightforward, favoring this push at the current price points for gas and other energy, and given the state of the internal combustion engine.
Now, it's a really important topic to discuss, because you see, they always try to make issues like this into a binary argument where either you buy their line of Bolshevik or you're against it. So they're telling you that net reduction in carbon dioxide between 2018 and 2050 is important, but carbon dioxide is not harming the planet. It's causing trees and plants to grow. It's these other toxic chemicals like sulfur monoxide and other things that are being put out into the environment. So it always seems to be a more complicated discussion than they want to have. And this doesn't talk at all about the carbon credit exchange and how money is made by that and who's making money from that, who published this. I think the ultimate idea behind Tesla, at least, is that everybody has solar power to charge their electric cars. But this is a really valid point to discuss. It's like, how much further would we go and how much less would it cost, and how much more quickly could we get there if people just had more efficient internal combustion cars?
And solar, I think today, and certainly in the United States, is a tiny percentage of the power generated,
Right.
total power generated. So we've been watching with alarm, Fabien is, I believe, in France as we speak. We've been watching these yellow jacket protests. Apparently they're getting, you're on it right there, yeah. They're
you forgot your yellow vest, Charles.
well, I figure, you do it once, and then
You're supposed to say what yellow vest?
That's true. Yeah. Anyway, so the situation it's not just Paris now; it's across France.
It's crazy that we're seeing nothing about this. If it wasn't for the internet, for Paul Joseph Watson and Luke Rudowsky and other independent journalists out there, we would not really see any of this.
Well, wait till it comes here, because in the summer it could well come here.
I definitely don't want cars burning as I walk the streets of New York City. That doesn't seem helpful to me.
No, I'm not talking about the cars burning so much as people, wearing yellow vests and saying, if this stuff doesn't work, if the Trump program doesn't work, or if the Democrats are obstinate in their decision to keep the government shut down no matter what, and we just go, for months and months of resistance and silliness, you could well see the mood of the population here change.
Now, Charles, I noticed our friend Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez gave her first floor speech about the plight of one of her constituents who is suffering from the government shutdown. And obviously, I don't want anybody's individual family to suffer from that. But the worker that she selected was an air traffic controller, which maybe a lot of people don't remember, but I do. Ronald Reagan famously fired all air traffic controllers when they went on strike. And I guess that was the point where it became a government job. Why are air traffic controllers a government job? Pilots of planes aren't. Why don't they have some private industry like the airlines pay for that?
Well, that gets to a point that is an excellent point, and will get us a little bit off topic, but one area that has yet to be reformed in the United States that should be reformed is the privatization of airports. We have a lot of these airport authorities, or here in New York, for example, you have the Port Authority. It's a cumbersome grouping of all sorts of bureaucracies and different governments. Nobody's really sure who's doing what to whom. It's not accountable. And when you start that way, when you administer the site where the planes are landing, taking off, with this bureaucracy that is ungovernable, you can expect that you're going to waste a lot of money, and that's exactly what's going on. So that's an area that does need to be reformed.
Yeah.
Just continuing down the slides, we have a problem here with MBS. Here's Lindsey Graham, who has been on the Foreign Affairs Committee at the Senate for a long time, and he does know a lot, and obviously he's access to briefings I don't get. But he's made this point here that the king of Saudi Arabia, has selected one of his children to be the ruler. Some believe, and Graham is alleging, that MBS may well have been complicit in this murder of Khashoggi in October. This is not going to be a problem that will easily be solved. Saudi Arabia is not going to back away. The ailing king is not going to say, oh yeah, I'm not going to let my son, take the job. He's already been consolidating power. And if we want to make an issue about it, the first thing Saudi Arabia is going to do is continue to cozy up to Putin and to Russia. So this is an area, this is a sticky wicket here.
Charles, this just reeks of absolute crap to me. Lindsey Graham is not someone that I have ever liked or trusted. And the fact that we've got a 28-page Senate Intelligence Committee report that implicates Bandar bin Sultan, his wife, and a third Saudi Arabian diplomat in funneling over $100,000 to the 19 hijackers, alleged hijackers of 9/11, co-signing for the apartments that they lived in while they were here, even if all they were patsies in that plan. Why did Lindsey Graham or someone in his similar position not make similar comments about that? There's something very stinky about this Khashoggi murder, and this is another sign that there's a Saudi royal family, deep state versus Trump, whole thing going on, and I think Lindsey Graham is on the wrong side of it.
Do you have, just for a second here, you have this thing, Cardi B?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that Cardi B was a female rapper.
Yeah. Yeah. She's torching Tomi Lahren with a savage clapback. I will dog walk you.
And AOC is siding with Cardi B and all this. I mean, this is.
Oh wow, Cardi B is a real. I don't know much about Cardi B at all, to tell you the truth, Charles.
I have no interest in knowing more.
But it's a good point, though, because that's what they're doing with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's kind of like our first political pop star. They're really working to build her fame.
She's a female Justin Bieber.
Exactly. Without
who's
the
Canadian,
tattoos.
I think, right?
Yeah.
So on a more serious note, people may have been watching this Ebola outbreak in the Congo. We're going to talk about the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And you're going to see just how desperate a place it is. But Lord help us if Ebola virus is headed towards large concentrations of people. There are several large cities in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And this is the kind of outbreak that it could run rampant across Africa, and then, Lord help us if it gets into airplanes and other places. So we should keep it. You want to worry about something that's an imminent, clear, and present danger. This
Ebola?
Is something to worry about.
Ebola?
Yeah. So with that, on that happy note, I would like to start here by calling out Michael Wolff, who is the supposed chief risk officer of BKD. And if he's the chief risk officer and not, trying to negotiate a get-out-of-jail-free card with whoever is investigating the Clinton Foundation,
then he doesn't understand the risks.
He doesn't understand the risk, because history shows very clearly, the evidence that is in the public domain, that's all we have, shows clearly that BKD has been the chief enabler of the Clinton Foundation fraud. It's not like one little mistake. From the very beginning, this man recently, Michael Wolff, reviewed the file, and his signature, his John Hancock, his Michael Wolff, is on the amended tax informational returns for the Clinton Foundation for 2010, 11, and 12, which don't even deserve an F. They wouldn't get an F. They're not in the same zone as an F. This is a triple Z. It's worse than a triple Z. No part of the tax return is accurate. And the danger for Wolff is when you look him up, he is, as I say, the chief risk officer, but he came up through the BKD wing that specializes in advising charities and government entities. So it's not like he can say, well, I don't know anything about this area. I mean, he's done a lot of this work. And as we're going to show you in a second, the problem with the documents that he signed, starting with 2010, is that the opening balance sheet that drives all the activity, subsequent activity in those returns, is December 31st, 2009. It bears as much resemblance to a compliant balance sheet as a mixture of yogurt and kombucha and sauerkraut. I mean, there's nothing, no part of that balance sheet complies with the what are called U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. No part of it. It leaves out hundreds of millions of dollars of potential assets. It overstates the biggest asset on the books by $40+ million. It misses all kinds of things. It misses, among other things, that it's not a charity. I mean, it's disgusting. Wolff, I mean, maybe he doesn't speak or read English, but this Clinton Foundation, when you look at the determining document, the Articles of Incorporation, you look at the rules, you don't have to be an expert like Wolff, you just look on the Guide to Charities, and it shows you in the Articles of Incorporation of a charity, that's where it tells you what you can and cannot do, as modified by your application for federal tax exemption to the IRS, which very clearly states, without doubt, that the Clinton Foundation is only allowed to pursue activities based in Little Rock. And not even, eventually, not just Little Rock, in the Clinton Presidential Park, which is in a specific part of Little Rock. That's the only place that the Clinton Foundation is allowed to actually carry out activities in furtherance of its tax-exempt purposes. Yet, beginning in 2001, before they'd even really started work in the Little Rock facility, Bill Clinton said, screw this library crap, in essence. I'm going to fight HIV/AIDS, I'm going to fight climate change, I'm going to fight on behalf of disaster victims around the world. And he did all this work without bothering to sign himself up officially as a director or a trustee or an executive. Who knows what board minutes may be there. Didn't bother to make representations as required in New York State, that he's going to change the purposes of the Clinton Foundation but not change the Articles of Incorporation. So from 2001 to 2004, this, I don't know that Wolff himself oversaw this, but BKD, his firm, the Little Rock branch of the BKD, which may or may not have registered properly to provide accounting services under the name BKD LLP beginning in March of 2002, they issued 4 ridiculous documents that we've been through this before, that state on the face of it, these documents are prepared using accounting principles that are not allowed in the United States of America. It's like, I would like here to confess to charity fraud, bank fraud, wire fraud, this fraud, that fraud, and then I'll sign my name, BKD LLP. Now, they don't give the address, I think, on some of the letters as to where you would find BKD. Later ones they do. So maybe it's not as bad as the bank robber who goes in and says, please give me all the money in the bank, and if,
leaves his driver's license.
There's a picture and a telephone number.
They're at the Mizzou game.
Exactly.
You can find them there, the front row with Truman.
So there are four, in quotes, audits, which are a joke, that of course you're never going to find on the Clinton Foundation website because they know enough not to put them up there. And then BKD follows that opening act up with 5 subsequent false and materially misleading audits from 2005 to 2009. So, maybe somebody went to Wolf and said, listen, we got you covered. Barack's the president. Hillary's going to be the president. You're covered. Don't worry about law. The Constitution be damned. Your license be damned. Just don't worry about any of that. Just assume you're covered because I've got a piece of paper here saying you're covered. Sign the damn amended return. And maybe that happened. In which case, we need to understand who would have thought to go to that he or she had that kind of authority with Michael Wolff. So by 2015, by November 16, 2015, when Wolff signs these amended returns, and in so doing encourages Price Waterhouse to come in and sign a return, and Cohen-Resnick ultimately to sign returns, I'm going to hazard a guess that Wolff certainly knew, and that if the FBI pulled a Manafort-style raid on all around BKD, all around Wolff, all around Eric Hansen and the others, they'd come in Manafort style, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning one day with 20 agents. They're going to find extensive correspondence. Cover your ass memos inside BKD, accounting working papers that will demonstrate that Wolff and others knew that the reorganization was a sham and probably had concerns about their exposure. So we've been through this before, but I'll just remind people, all the applications, every single freaking one of them on Form 1023 that were put in to create these Clinton Foundation charities,
that's just an honest
all wrong. All knowingly wrong, right? To this day, these entities continue to either cover up or just straight out omit disclosures about government investigations, about settlements, about past infractions. And the problem, starting with the U.S., is that when you use a fundraiser illegally, when you have your authority to use discounted mail revoked by the IRS, when you have your operating authority revoked in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, when you're disciplined for fundraising violations for the charity in Mississippi a bunch of times, and you lie about it, you don't get it. It's not just a traffic ticket. When there's a pattern in practice of deception, of diversion, and it goes on this long for 20 years, you are not running a charity. You're running a criminal supposed enterprise.
Diversion, perversion. Charles, Dynamex is in the comments reminding us that do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law under Tholema, the 93 Society, where some of that numerology stuff comes from. I believe Dynamex is trying to tell us that this is a good example of someone exercising that practice.
Right. And so in addition to doing all this, when I know from personal experience with other matters that when you retain a real accounting firm, a serious accounting firm that takes its duties seriously, they put you through the ringer. They ask you tough questions. They don't go and say, well, you're telling me that your revenue, your receivables are 12 million. I'll just say 12 million sounds good to me. I'm not going to check to make sure that you didn't steal another 197 million over here and not tell me about it. You say all you're due from the world is 12 million. I'll put 12 million up on the. That's not the way real accountants work.
Well, Kevin is reminding us that accountants don't operate under the same sort of guidelines as attorney-client privilege. So that really sets up the whole relationship between the accountant and the client.
Well, I think the point Kevin might be making there is that's a plus for any serious investigator,
right?
Because unlike, Cohen's office was raided and his papers were raided, I guess, but normally the FBI and DOJ are not going to be in the business of raiding lawyers. But no such stricture operates to prevent the FBI from going after BKD aggressively here and say, look, show us the damn whole file. And generally speaking, again, in my experience, what accountants do if they say, if the rule is you only have to keep papers for 3 to 5 years, accounting firms that have been around know that the big scandals are the ones that often come up years and years and years later. So it's always a good idea to keep your files longer than you're supposed to.
I thought 7 years was the...
Well, it could be, with a charity, as I think BKD is in process of figuring out, they haven't already figured it out, there really is no statute of limitations, I'm told by lawyers, for conspiracies that are ongoing, which I think this conspiracy to obstruct the investigation of the Clinton Foundation is very much ongoing. And the IRS normally has the right, they can't check everything, but they have the right, and they hold a gigantic stick over your head, of being able to go back into your application for tax exemption, which in this case was October 23, 1997, when it was first, December 23, 1997. There's a file at the IRS going all the way back to then, saying, you know, what did you tell us then? There's all sorts of correspondence. We've tried to get it. We've been denied getting it, which is a big red flag. You're supposed to be able to see that. And for some strange reason, you still can't get it. But BKD did not do, in my opinion, the type of diligence to be charitable that they should have done on Bill Clinton and the Clinton family's personal interests, which stand in massive conflict, both in just notional principal conflict, but substantive money conflict of interest with the charity. Take, for example, just the narrow laureate case where the Clinton family, Bill and Hillary that is, got $17.6 million from a supposed joint venture partner of a portion of the Clinton Foundation that doesn't exist legally and didn't disclose it.
It's a huge sum of money to get.
$17.6 million. I mean, it's less than their speeches, but it's, you know, it's a large amount of money, and it's an obvious thing.
There can't be anyone in the history of charity who has earned 17 million for themselves by being involved in charity. It seems like the opposite of charity.
No, it's strictly illegal.
Yeah,
strictly illegal. So beyond that, if you're not going to, if Wolf's going to hang his hat and say, you know, well, I'm not good with numbers. That's why they put me in charge of risks. I'm not good with numbers. I spot risks. By the 2nd of November 2013, the Clintons and their people placed the Clinton family in control of what's supposed to be a public charity that cannot be controlled by a family by amending the bylaws and keeping that fact secret from many state governments, telling the directors on the one hand, as a guest, don't worry about your problems. We've taken control of this. Problems arise, it's our issue. But then saying, you know, we're not going to tell any of these states. They don't need to know that.
I've told you one of the best things anybody ever said to me ever was, right? I didn't tell you the truth because I knew it would upset you.
Exactly.
Like, right. Isn't that the reason that lying was invented?
Right, exactly. So, you know, Wolf has got a lot of explaining to do, as does Eric Hansen, who's chairman of the AICPA, which is the body, you know, while still being chief operating officer of BKD. Hansen is chair of the, really, one of the most important standard-setting bodies for accounting in the United States and indeed around the world.
The Truman the Tiger fan club?
Exactly.
He's chairman of that.
But, you know, it's worthwhile reminding people that Arthur Andersen went out of complete existence, a much larger firm, went out of existence. Some would say after the fact that Weissman, who was involved with the prosecution
of Enron?
Well, and of Arthur Andersen as well, the Enron task force, that some argue that Andersen was put out of business incorrectly, that they should have had an opportunity. I think Sidney Powell writes about it in her book, but for far smaller offenses than what we're talking about here. A much larger firm went out of existence, costing the country 50,000 jobs. So I think, you know, it's time.
Well, but wait a minute. Didn't all those accountants just go work for other crooked accounting firms?
No, it's not as simple as that. So when you are working in a big accounting firm and that firm goes, you know, belly up, there's a shadow cast on you. So yeah, some people may have found other employment.
I do believe Unisys hired a lot of them.
Well, in the case of Drexel Burnham, people said, you know, when it blew up the investment bank, that that would be really bad. And in fact, a lot of people at Drexel Burnham went to other firms, and the lawyers made out like bandits.
As they do.
Yeah. So this is a case where it's, we want to rake Mr. Manafort over the coals. We got to rake Mr. Wolf and BKD over the coals here, because I think this is now in a place where BKD and Hansen and the AICPA's failure to hold BKD to account here is proof that the accounting profession in this country cannot police itself. And particularly, as we're going to show you in a second, the magnitude of this fraud is so large and continues unabated that it needs to be called out. It needs to be, the people who are pursuing this fraud and benefiting from this fraud, they need to be severely punished.
It seems like nothing can police itself. We've heard about crooked lawyers whose partners are part of the Bar Association in Arizona, and the OIG doing all these oversights of their own departments. Why do we have these things trying to police themselves? It's almost always going to fail. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, here's a case in point. It's tough. I put here possibly BKD's worst Clinton Foundation audit ever, because it's when you're looking at the various supposed audits put out by BKD, there are a lot of seriously bad ones. But this is one. Remember, for the full year 2008 and 2009. We remember that on December 31st, 2009, the Clinton Health Access Initiative CEO submits a report to the IRS asking for federal tax exemption, in which that person claims, having been the CEO or the leader of the predecessor operation, he claims that the entity that he's running is not a successor operation to any other entity. Yet, the audit that comes out actually the same day, December 31st, 2009 for 2008, and then the one that's finished the 10th of November 2010 for 2009 and 8, both show that a very large entry in the balance sheet, about $70 million or so, assets limited as to use include assets of the Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative in its partnership with Unitate. Okay, this is a line from the audit for 2009, and then fully suggesting that there was a Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative and that it was big in 2008 and 2009. Then below it, it talks about contributions receivable, and it says the ones that are due within a year, 13.6 million at December 31st, 2008, 12.6 million December 31st, 2009. Long-term receivables, i.e. due in 1 or more years out, 7.7 at 31 December 2008, 3.7, 31 December 2009. So total receivables, 21.3 down to 16.4 by December 31st, 2009. So one of the oldest tricks in the book in fraud is to run an entity, in this case a charity, and to fly around the world and say, why don't you, gullible multilateral organization that doesn't police itself, why don't you agree to give me a whole bunch of money, and we'll say it's going to the Clinton Foundation, but don't look too carefully in the Clinton Foundation books, because you won't find your money in the Clinton Foundation books. Your money is going to go to other accounts. We'll split your money up. You'll get the house in Stade, she'll get the yacht, so-and-so will get the whatever, and the politicians in various countries, they'll split the balance.
Where's Stade? Switzerland?
Switzerland, yeah. Not too far away from Geneva. So we look at this and we say, the balance sheet, they're saying the total amount of money at the end of December 31st, 2009 that is due to the Clinton Foundation is 3.7 million of long-term contributions. Let's go to the videotape. Let's look at the next page. What does the next page show? This, and we've provided the links to the actual Unitate board resolution in both cases. This shows that on the 12th and 13th of May 2009, Unitate granted $120.4 million to an entity that didn't exist, CHI, a piece of the William J. Clinton Foundation which had no authority to do this work. They nonetheless gave it a commitment of $120.4 million. Now, is $120.4 million greater than $3.7 million, Jason?
Seems a little bit.
Yeah. And it says here, this resolution, I don't want to pull the link up, but the rest, I excerpted certain things here just to show that there's got to be a lot of paperwork in the UNITAID files about this $120.4 million commitment that was made, where the money's supposed to start flying out in 2010 and 11. In other words, this $120 million should show up as a receivable as of December 31st, 2010. This was a decision made May 12th and 13th, 2009, so well before November 10th, 2010, when BKD issued its audit for the balance sheet as of year-end, December 31st, 2009. So, you know, either they were told, BKD, listen, you're just going to do an American audit. We don't, and all this international stuff, that's our slush fund. We don't want you to look into that slush fund because Hillary's the Secretary of State, and it really would look pretty bad if Hillary, the Clinton family, is like skimming this order of magnitude while she's Secretary of State. But trust me, Mike, this is like chump change compared to what we're doing in Australia and Ireland and elsewhere. But leave that for another day. So here's 121 there. And Jason, was that the only thing they missed with UNITAID? No.
Oh, sure not.
The second one is a further $76.9 million was pledged for 2010, this time on December 14th and 15th, 2009. So these are important periods. In May of 2009, there was no Clinton Health Access Initiative, Inc. It wasn't formed until September 29th, 2009, right? So how in the hell could UNITAID be so dumb as to, you know, continue giving? We're going to show you just how much money they did give. It's much more than this. To an entity, starting in 2006, they allocated money to an entity that legally didn't exist. And they said, yeah, we'll do it 7, 8, now we're going to do it 9, we did it. We're going to do, you know, sign us up for 10 and 11, you know, and nobody in Switzerland bothered to check and see, you know, can the Clinton Foundation do any of this stuff?
2 short questions. What is Sarkozy's relationship with UNITAID, and what did UNITAID, if anything, have to do with Libya?
Okay, Sarkozy was, in this period, the leader of France, and his foreign minister, the former foreign minister of France, Philippe Douste-Blazy,
yes,
was the person who was chair of UNITAID at this point. So there is a school of thought that elements in France have been using UNITAID as a personal piggy bank to finance French political matters and offshore things potentially in Libya and elsewhere. And this is one here where the Swiss don't have the authority to investigate this because it's part of the World Health Organization. And the French may claim that they don't have the authority to investigate this because the actual problem is not in France, but outside France. Because they don't want to follow the problem, maybe. I'm not saying this is going to happen.
Or perhaps they've created UNITAID in this unique way just so it's difficult to investigate.
Right. And so here we have, just to give people a sense, we're talking here about 197.3 million. Okay? This figure is 77.9 million larger than the total value of the Little Rock complex, and there's a small stump of real estate in Boston, I think. 119 is the largest asset on the balance sheet. But BKD somehow manages to misplace and not care about $197 million worth of revenue in the form of contributions receivable that should, in my view, have been booked in 2009 as revenue. And would have changed the reported results of the Clinton Foundation radically. But it also would have created a gigantic problem, because if you have a receivable of $197.3 million from UNITAID in these two programs, how do you claim to the IRS that this new Clinton Health Access Initiative is not a successor organization to the people who got $197 million together? And how do you explain the fact that this new organization, Clinton Health Access Initiative, is going to be controlled for its life by Bill Clinton and Ira Magaziner and the Clinton Foundation, even though there are all sorts of problems with Bill Clinton, Ira Magaziner, and the Clinton Foundation, looking at the record of the Clinton Foundation with Bill from October 23, 1997 forward, and Magaziner's, in my view, criminal annulment, claiming that he's running this CHI thing, which is not, in my view, a charity, as a charity, but running it from his consulting firm's office. and doing consulting firm business, possibly with governments and vendors, to this charity. It reeks to high heaven.
So what were they up to, Charles? I detect that you have something in mind, but why was it important to them to not have it be a successor according to the IRS?
Well, so a successor corporation, the standard way in which one standard warning sign for charity fraud is if Charles and Jason get together and when we create the Sunday with Charles charity and we raise $100 million and then we decide to shut it down.
Create the closing in charity.
Yeah, or we could do the Sunday with
Monday with
Chaz,
okay,
C-H-A-S, or then Sunday with Chucky or whatever. When you have a series of charities that are created with similar names, what fraudsters will do is they'll say they use the money for the first charity, and then in the liquidation of the first charity, they'll skive off a whole bunch of money. They'll say, yeah, they won't tell you about $197 million worth of receivables that they had. They'll just keep it personally for themselves and split it in the Cayman Islands or somebody else. It's a standard red flag for fraud. And in addition, I would note that the pieces of the Clinton Foundation that were, in quotes, reorganized in this period in 2009 constituted a liquidation. They should have been, there's a Schedule N that should have been filled out explaining the liquidation from the parent of Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative, Alliance for a Healthier Generation, Clinton Global Initiative, and what's the other one? Well, those three at least. And they didn't do any of this. So you look at this and you say, Mr. Wolf, you're the dude who just on November 16th, 2015, you signed under penalties of perjury amended return for 2010 that starts with a balance sheet that is absurdly wrong. How could you not know that? You're the chief risk officer of BKD. I mean, what do you just like, you get that title because you're the only person dumb enough to not look at any of the risks and you're just going to sign your name to anything and hope that, by the time you get caught, you can claim that you have Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that? I mean,
is yes a bad answer to that question?
So if we go to the next page. Okay, we look at this Unitaid, and I think there's a very large stink bum in France, because if we look at the top, 62% of the money from 2006 through 2011, $1 billion came from France.
Wow.
Over $250 million came from the UK. Over $100 million came from Norway. The genius Bill Gates puts in $50 million. They put in, all told, $1.6 billion. Okay? Now, rather than grant that money away, they only grant 1.1 billion of it away, which is, we're going to show you that that's a standard way, I think, to create a slush fund.
Bill Gates put money into Unitaid and also separately into the Clinton Foundation.
Right.
What's his explanation for why he did that?
He does not have a good explanation. And
it doesn't make sense to do that, does it?
Yeah, that could have something to do with that JFK comment. But if you go down the list here, look how much money in this period. Now, this is a period, I picked this because this encompasses the 2009 BKD audit work.
Am I in the right spot?
Old chai, the red thing. This Unitaid gives, in this period, almost $500 million, 44% of the money that Unitaid doles out in this period. It's really 5 years and change. Go to an entity that doesn't lawfully exist, that has not consolidated its books properly, that hasn't set up subsidiaries in the key countries where it operates, it hasn't complied with local law, it hasn't explained why it was using adulterated drugs, it hasn't done anything right, in short. Yet Unitaid, is so careful that they decide to overcommit. 44% of the money that was spent goes to this piece of garbage, old chai.
So Kevin is telling us that Unitaid's audited, I don't know what that stands for, F/S.
Financial statement.
Okay. For year-end 2009 were issued in April of 2010, 7 months before the Clinton Foundation's financial statement was issued.
Yeah, that's a good point. But so we look here at the largest grant went to Old Shy. The second largest went to another slush fund, UNICEF.
UNICEF.
That's the one my parents wouldn't let me raise money for when I was in second or third grade or whatever it was. And then, you know, the third largest grant is to the Global Fund. We're going to show you how much of a slush fund that is in a second. So you look at this and you say, just at surface level, you know, it sounds good, and I'm sure it's fun to operate something like this thing from Geneva. I love Geneva. I've been there many, many times. It's in the winter it's wonderful. In the summer it's wonderful. It's a fun place to go. It's like, kind of like a small Paris without the Parisians, and closer to skiing and stuff. But anyway, you look at this and you say, why, you know, with pressing, we're going to show you the scale of the challenges in 2 countries in Africa. With the scale of these challenges, why are we setting up a slush fund, yet another slush fund in Switzerland, so that overpaid globalists can swan around the world with their 13 crackberries, pretending that they're doing good work, but instead over-allocating 44% of the grants to an obvious fraud, giving $500 million to an obvious fraud? You know, how did so many people, why did so many people get this so wrong for so long?
I don't know.
Let's now look at the Global Fund. Now, this will be the first time that we've taken you through, this is to give you just a sense of the scale of this slush fund, okay? It was started in 2002. Somebody who played a central role in its early period subsequently spent time in prison, Rajat Gupta, the leader of McKinsey. It has solicited and received $43 billion by way of contributions, chiefly from governments. $43 billion in this time frame.
It's a lot.
Note that its income is about the same. Now, that to me is very suspicious, because, as in the case of Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, when you get a lot of cash in the front door and you take your time to put it into grants, you're going to see volatile currency movements. Operating costs are going to be probably not in dollars or euros. They're going to be in local currencies of countries that are not doing well against the hard currency countries. So you should see a lot more swings and roundabouts in currency, and you should also see investment income, which you don't see enough of that.
Stupid question, Charles. What's the difference between a hard currency and a soft currency?
Hard currency would be a currency that maintains its value relative to, say, gold, or, you know, that doesn't depreciate quickly in value. So the famous one people joke about is the Zimbabwe currency, that, you know, had inflation so high that, you know, you put the currency in your wallet and you think you got $100 worth of currency, and by, you know, a week later it's worth a penny. That kind of stuff. A hard currency would hold its value, and a soft currency.
Does such a currency exist in this day and age?
Well, the US dollar's actually been pretty strong recently.
I thought it's like, you know, 2% of what it was in the 1970s.
I'm talking about in the current period.
Got it.
The dollar has been reasonably strong. You're absolutely right. That analysis like that is tough to do rigorously, because, you know, people's buying habits change as technology improves, and how do you actually come up with an index that measures the store, the real true store of value?
You should call it a semi-rigid currency.
But so we look at this. The important number is that only 84% of the contributions went out in the form of grants. 7%, or $2.5 billion, was spent on operating costs. That's a lot of operating costs. And again, I ask, you know, why is it in this day and age that we need to have these multilateral aid organizations based in one of the most expensive places in the world to operate, notorious until recently for having slush fund secret bank accounts in the same city? It just doesn't...
That was here?
Geneva.
Oh.
I mean, the Swiss banks, Zug, Zurich, Geneva, are all... I mean, they changed those rules recently, so it's not possible to get away with the same amount of funny business that you once were able to get away with. But as Fabien reminds us, the one corner of the financial system that has not been strictly regulated yet is charities. Investment funds have been regulated, corporations are regulated, but charities have not yet been tightly regulated, and they need to be.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's the reason right there why so many fraudsters flock to 501c3s because it's not regulated. What does that mean, that it's not regulated? There are laws about it.
The point is that you can put laws up on the books, as we see with the Clinton Foundation, but if there's no prosecutor who's going to do anything about it, and with a multinational operation, there is no effective regulator of anything multinational. You rely on the nation of the host country. You go to a GE and you say, all right, you better sort this out in the United States, otherwise there are going to be consequences in these 25 countries, and it gets sorted out. But there needs to be, particularly for charities, there needs to be a rigorous oversight mechanism with stringent penalties. And I mean, for what's going on here in this Clinton Foundation, I'm not a huge fan of the death penalty in general. I think it's too nice. But there need to be horrific penalties for people who would abuse a charity. So if we go to the next page, I promise I'd give you a sense of the plight, the condition of some of these countries versus the condition of some of the big donors, in particular advocates of unregulated globalism. So we'll take a few minutes on this. It's interesting, Jason, the population in Ethiopia, 108.4 million. Congo, 85.3, Germany, 80.5, top line. UK, 65.1, France, only 62.8. That's metropolitan France. Now, in Ethiopia, out of those 108 million people, 71 million people in Ethiopia, according to the CIA, have no electricity.
Well, how could it be zero, though?
Everyone in France, the UK, and Germany has electricity or access to it.
There's no like hut out there in
everybody,
outskirts of Lyon.
On there, it's CIA data, but it's
Exactly.
It's consistently done, but it makes sense. Everyone has access. And why is that important? The cost of putting up an electrical grid. We're going to show you in a second how large these countries are. They're massive, in challenging conditions. The cost of getting electricity distributed out to these countries is immense. And the cost of getting the infrastructure right is immense. And when we look at this line, urban percent, only 21% of the people in Ethiopia are in cities. Only 45% in Congo. Whereas in Germany, UK, and France, it's roughly 80%.
What about the US?
It's roughly the same. And so what that means is that if you have, no electricity, people scattered around the country, the costs of actually, putting electricity in, and we think about the United States of America pre-electricity, it was a very different place. And again, the climate in Ethiopia and Congo, Ethiopia has some high ground, but the bulk of the climate it's damn hot. And you have a situation where you don't have electricity and you need to get clean water, fresh water to people. You need to have roads to get around. You don't have that. Now, what do we have by way of population? Growth rate. Some of the fastest growing populations in large countries are in these two countries, Ethiopia and Congo. Above 2% growth. Germany's declining. UK and France, these include immigrants. So if you could exclude the migrants,
probably declining also.
Probably declining also. And then the makeup of the population is very different. In Ethiopia and the Congo, 16%, 15% of the senior group is 15 to 16% of the youth group through age 14, right? Whereas in Germany, the senior group is 2.9 times the youth, UK 1.7, France 1.7. But look at these absolute numbers, right? You have 81 million people in Ethiopia and Congo under the age of, or through the age of 14. Whereas in these much richer countries, we have less than 35 million through the age of 14. What that means is the growth potential of Germany, UK, and France is not high. Right?
Not good.
Not high, unless they change the way in which they encourage people to have families.
Make Germany Ethiopia again.
But now let's look at the size of these countries, right? This is just the land that you could grow stuff on or have forests on. In Ethiopia, 500,000 square kilometers. It's gigantic. Congo, almost 2 million, right? Germany is only 250,000. UK, 200,000. France, almost 500,000, okay? these countries, Ethiopia is much bigger than France. Congo is immense. According to the CIA, they have just blank for the miles of paved roads inside the Congo. Now, having spent time as a young, foolish kid, getting the back, hitchhiking in Africa,
Ooh.
you do some pretty stupid-ass things, which I did do. I go from the border of Niger down into
Hitchhiking.
hitchhiking.
You could have been macheted.
I know, and we ended up, it was just a brief vignette. We were grateful to get transportations. This big truck pulls up, and it's empty in the back. And we said, this is great. We go in the back, and it's got like this fine dirt on it. And we're thinking, this is great. It's, it's moving. There's open air, so it's kind of cool. And we'll get there in like 6 hours. No big deal. And then about 20 minutes into it, it makes an abrupt stop. And we're thinking, oh boy, what's going to happen now? In come the chickens and the goats and the war-painted Africans and the this and the that. And so it was pretty wild. And we ended up, showing up, being spit out of this truck at like 1 o'clock in the morning in some town in the center of Benin.
Wow.
And we walk into the hotel, this little hotel to get rooms, and they take one look at the three of us, three white guys, and they're like, what the hell's wrong with you? Because we were covered there was so much dirt and whatever, it took each of us about half an hour of a shower to get all that crap off. Anyway,
Wow.
When you think about a country as vast as the Congo, 1.8 million square kilometers, no paved roads, only 4,000 kilometers of railway, and only 26 airports. How in the hell are you going to get around that country? How are you going to get HIV/AIDS medicine distributed out to these places? You're just not going to do it that easily. And by contrast, look at this much smaller country, Germany. It has 278 square kilometers of forest land, of arable and forest land. It has 645,000 kilometers of paved roads, as contrasted to Ethiopia, 14.4.
They got a lot of BMWs, Mercedes, Porsches, and Audis to drive around.
But I mean, just simple math. If you say, I'm not saying that we should decide anything about Ethiopia and Congo, but if you're going to be realistic about the infrastructure, the underinvestment in roads and airports and railways in Ethiopia and Congo versus probably the overinvestment in Germany, the UK, and France.
How does France not know how many roads?
It could just be that the yellow jackets are making it impossible to count the number. I don't know. But it's a gigantic difference. So then we turn to the question of consumption. Okay, consumption is in all of Ethiopia. According to the UNCTAD, the UN statistics, the 108 million people in Ethiopia only consumed $47.7 billion worth of stuff. Democratic Republic of Congo's only 32 million. But you look at these other big countries, Germany, 1.8 trillion, France, 1.7 trillion, UK, 1.4 trillion. Then the share that the top 10% consumed, right, as a percentage of the total, a quarter in Ethiopia, 35% in the Democratic Republic, and between 25 and 30% in Europe. So you then figure out the consumption, the consumption of the bottom 90% and take it divided by 90% of the population. And you see here that in Ethiopia, $364, $1 a day per person per year in consumption. Congo, less than $1 a day. Whereas it's kind of tight in Germany, France, and the UK, it's roughly $20,000 per person for the bottom 90% in each of those countries. Look at the divide between Ethiopia and Democratic Republic of Congo and these rich donor countries. And then look at this statistic on doctors. Per 100,000 people in Ethiopia, you have 3 doctors.
That's crazy.
In Congo, 9. In Germany, 419. 283, 300.
Are you implying, Charles, that it might be more worthwhile to contribute doctors than pharmaceuticals?
Well, yeah. This is actually the leader of South Africa, Mbeki, who was attacked by Clinton, actually, for making the point that he was not certain back in 2000, 2001, et cetera, that South Africa's health system was ready to administer the treatment because, I would guess, precisely this reason. They
Yes.
don't have, people are not concentrated in cities the way they are in Germany and the United States. The road system is not there, the electricity is not there. There's a massive investment required to try to bring, if you want to do this, to try to bring African infrastructure close to a place where it would be responsible to go on this type of regime. And by the way, the administration which the Clintons have focused on and UNITAID focused on are providing HIV/AIDS medicines to children. You know, that's the core of these youth through 14. It's very tough for children to get HIV and AIDS. They sadly get raped. They can get it through mother-to-child transmission, but children are not getting HIV/AIDS through drug use at this young age. You might get it a little bit later than that. To have something as the Clinton Foundation and UNITAID is so heavily concentrated on providing HIV/AIDS medicines to children in countries where there is no infrastructure, using people who have, do not control their operations properly, do not have medical experience, and haven't even bothered to comply with Massachusetts law, US law, Arkansas law, American law, a donor country law, let alone the laws of Ethiopia and Congo, is an exercise to me. It is so far away. It makes that idiot Professor Gruber look like he knew what he was talking about on Obamacare. I mean, it's just, this is really a disgusting indictment here. We haven't even, we're only talking about the two of the large countries in Africa. This tale is repeated across the many other countries where this Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, and shame on Bill Gates for sticking with it, and shame on the Children's Investment Fund for sticking with this, and the governments. There are a lot of smart people out there who know much more about this from the inside, who should be called to account for enabling the despicable programs that the Clintons did outside the scope of their authority, and then furthering the cover-up. So then we go to the next page. What I did here is I compare and contrast the total amount of money that has been invested, to give you a sense of what I mean by investing. It's like when you had your company, when I had my companies, you don't just say, because I come to you and say, look, I think we should buy 6 of these cameras over here, it's going to cost you $500,000 or whatever it is. You say,
maybe we only need 2.
Yeah, but why 1? I mean, what's the economic, and you tend to have, not at the UNITAID, obviously, not at the Clinton Foundation, not at the Global Fund. It's like, hey, yeah, what's my cut? Why do we say 6 cameras? Are you kidding me? Why don't we say 6,000?
Well, you're the camera salesman now.
Right, exactly. But in countries where there is a robust private sector, in Germany and France and the UK, you can say it's socialized, but there is a robust business activity and tradition in those countries, you fight over every investment dollar, right? And the result of all this is that for the 16 years, from 2001 to 2016, in Ethiopia, $152.5 billion was invested. In Congo, only 60. In Germany, almost 10 trillion. In France, 8.5 trillion. In the UK, 6.7 trillion. Okay? So the market speaks and says, you know what? We're fine with investing in Germany, France, and the UK. Not so fine with investing in Ethiopia and Congo. This doesn't tell you what share of that investment is provided by internal sources or external sources. It just says inside the UK, 6.7 trillion, inside France, 8.5 trillion, inside Germany, etc. So I take these figures, divide it by the population. And this tells you that in Ethiopia, you spent a total of $1,400 per person using the most recent population, which is actually drawn from July of 2018. You take that figure, divide it by the 16 years, that says that you spent $88 per person in Ethiopia over the 16-year period on capital projects. $88, okay? Do a similar exercise for Congo. Over this entire period, you spent $44 a year on capital projects. Now, $44 per person is not going to get you even like a portion of the wire that would be used to take electricity from the generating station to, so it's ridiculous.
It's a Big Mac, a venti frap, and a subway ride uptown.
A couple kombuchas.
Yeah.
Anyway, but contrast that to these other countries. In Germany, per person over 16 years, almost $7,600 was spent on investment. In France, $8,200. In the UK, $6,600. So if you're in a mode where you're spending that amount of money per year in Germany, France, and the UK, but in this 16-year period, which is, encompassed the rise of unregulated globalism writ large, there's been such underinvestment in Ethiopia and Congo. How can you sit there in the straight face and say, oh yeah, you people of Ethiopia and Congo, with people like the Clinton Foundation, helping you out here, and various non-governmental organizations, and the Gates Foundation and other people who don't check anything apparently carefully, we'll help you build a better future. And you don't assume that Germany and France are going to kick your ass for eternity, because they have this gigantic infrastructure built up, frankly, in part with our great help, the United States help after 1945. Yeah. Is it reasonable to assume, without a real transparent system inside Ethiopia and Congo, with no roads, no electricity, no airports, no pay, that you could actually
even distribute that stuff?
Yeah, distribute the aid that you're going to get, and instead of having these fancy symposia in Switzerland and New York and these places that are fun to travel, that have great restaurants and high living, and now afford all manner of opportunity for the leaders to siphon money away from the aid flows. This system doesn't really serve, in my view, the best interests of the people of Ethiopia and Congo, if those interests can at all be served by people outside the countries of Ethiopia and Congo.
And, Charles, while we're speaking, Americana is here in the comments reminding us that the Clintons purchased blood from prisoners in Arkansas that was HIV positive and distributed it through Canada. So to speculate about the possibility that causing some sort of disease outbreak so that they could then deliver some kind of vaccine or treatment for it or whatever is not beyond the realm of possibility. It brings me back to that story you showed us about Ebola. Could someone be causing that Ebola outbreak?
I hope not. I hope
Perhaps
not. But
there's an Ebola vaccine in the works.
But when you, unfortunately, and that we joke about this, but there are, you think about a guy like Rajat Gupta, who rose from graduating from Harvard Business School to become the chairman of McKinsey, managing partner of McKinsey, this gigantic consulting operation. He was a leader, played a leading role, and was the chairman of the Global Fund. He was advising Ranbaxy. He employed Chelsea Clinton. The number of people at McKinsey, the number of people who will look at this opportunity to enjoy life, brief as it is, and throw up their hands and say, you know what, in the end, we're dead, so who cares? So, let's just see how diabolically bad we can be. Unfortunately, it just takes a few of those people, and they seem to congregate in these multilateral organizations that are not regulated. They seem to flourish in academia. They seem to flourish in politics, in national capitals. And we just sit here in the main and say, we can't change it. Well, that's not true. I think the folks at Crowdsource the Truth can change it. We can make a difference here. We've got to apply the pressure, increase the pressure. If we keep going down the slide, just a few more things here. These fraudsters I speak about seem to be able to fool Bill Gates, Global Fund, Unite, Clinton Foundation, and there's always a siren call for more and more bureaucracies. If you hit this is a link, a glowing link to a book that is almost as unreadable as Michelle Obama's Princeton thesis. It's just, I start with the title, Governing Global Health. Who asked anybody to govern global anything?
I don't trust Oxford.
Yeah, I've enjoyed visiting there, but I agree. So, this sort of a book, which Chelsea wrote with co-author, is, it's a love story for unregulated globalism. It's a sob story. And it doesn't, it is actually parts critical of her father, but it is not the type of stuff that should be encouraged. We've got to solve The people of Congo and the people of Ethiopia and the people of these large countries that have great resources but have decided for whatever reason that they do not want to participate in the market-based economy, they do not want to advance the economic well-being of their citizenry, that's their choice. If they don't want to do it, that's fine. But if, in fact, there are people in Ethiopia who do want to see progress, in Congo who do want to see economic progress, there needs to be a better approach than allowing somebody who doesn't care about money, or anything, it would seem, to decide that she is going to govern global health. She's going to go down, she's been groomed, for a leadership position by her parents. Maybe there's this crazy plan, Bill first, Hillary second, then Chelsea third.
Whoa.
I mean, encouraging people to think this way when they're so intimately involved with a crooked organization that has broken, it seems to me, every important law and regulation pertaining to a charity. You can find serious infractions in the Clinton charities, their personal one, the main one, the related ones.
Charles, you've just said something that I don't know that anybody has really articulated exactly like that before. Bill, then Hillary, then Chelsea would be the first time anything like that has ever been done. What if this whole plan is all set up where that has to happen or it all fails? That would explain why they're so desperate to get Trump out and get Hillary in. Maybe somehow it triggers the next part of the plan.
Could be, could be. So this, we've had this up here, but I'd like to give a plug to Lindsay McCooey for her book, excellent book, No Such Thing as a Free Gift. And it's twinned in Amazon here with, I think there was a recommendation when it came up on my page to get another one like it. Winners Take All. This is an older book from 1996, I think. The Elite Charade. Is that what it says? Changing the World?
Of Changing the World, yeah.
Yeah. So these are good books to read carefully. Lindsay McCooey had the courage to take on the Gates Foundation a number of years ago in this book. And there's a lot of footnotes and sources. It's worth reading and also considering the footnotes and sources.
But Charles, the book is slightly incorrect. There is a free gift for sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth who go to patreon.com/crowdsource the truth and become sponsors for $10 a month or more. They're going to get the free Sunday with Charles screensaver.
Very good. So also I'd like to give a shout out to Duff McDonald for this book about McKinsey. Now that people are more familiar with the Clinton Foundation, this is an author who has written a book about Jamie Dimon, and he's a gifted writer, more for the popular audience than for the academic audience. And this, for people who don't know anything about McKinsey, this is really worth reading. And I would encourage Mr. McDonald to update this book.
Yeah, you've mentioned this book a number of times. Charles, I don't mean to distract you, but our friend UFC NHL has adamantly, repeatedly put in this question, wanting to know if you're aware of 72 trillion missing from HUD/DOD per Dr. Skidmore report in Forbes.
I am not aware of that report. I'm aware of allegations that there are vast sums missing from the Defense Department and from other branches of our federal government, absolutely. Now, Jason, have you heard of this idea of Minsky moment?
Minsky moment?
That's when there's too much debt, and suddenly people decide there's too much debt, and suddenly the only way to pay the debt off is for fire sales of assets. And you have an epic crash a la 1929 to 1933. This is a story that came out a few days ago on Zero Hedge, which I really encourage people to check. It's got it's fun articles, a varied palette of stories, but it's alleging, this piece says that we have $244 trillion of debt. That's a lot of debt.
Wow, yeah.
Our global output's about 80 trillion for all countries combined. That means 3 times output of debt for the whole country, the whole planet rather. And the mass of humanity lives on less than $5.50 a day. And that is an untenable position.
Earning money carrying anvils around.
So again, I know I always encourage people to be cautious. I would be especially cautious in 2019.
Yeah.
If we go back to the slide.
Who's Minsky and why did they
Hyman
name...
Minsky is a very famous economist, now dead.
I feel bad for people who have terrible, like Lou Gehrig probably didn't want that disease named after him, right?
So final thought here is, if we hit this final link here, we need to, I think, especially the United States, and we're going to continue down this path for at least the next 2 years of re-examining rules of thumb. I think we now have a 74-year history with the UN, or thereabouts. Maybe it's just, I forget exactly, with the post-World War II experiences, let's say 74 years. Is it such a great idea to give the UN officials immunity?
No.
Or should that immunity be restricted?
Yes.
And should there be a new system of regulating these various bodies that take so much, suck so much money, and do so much damage around the world under the cover of immunity? I mean, I really think this is not, social media, if it's done one good thing, it's allowed people to compare notes more easily about what truly may be going on in the ground. I think it is, I nearly said it, but I'll say it anyway, well past time for a re-examination of this concept of who should get immunity, for what actions should there be no immunity, how do we set up a multilateral watchdog? Should it start country by country? Should we begin in the United States by draining the swamp and making examples of Bill and Chelsea and Hillary and the cronies around them? And I just, every time I see this, the picture of Bill is
That's
just,
a different picture of
priceless.
him making that same stupid face than
That's
what
right.
I usually use. So
Right.
it's remarkable to see how frequently he makes that stupid face, but it just doesn't get old, Charles.
I know. And we won't put the slide up, but the final slide is just for people who want to check the math, is a listing, don't put the slide up, please, of the actual investment amounts by year for the 5 countries. All that's drawn from UNC TAD data.
And people can obviously download the thing. Well, so Charles, I think we've come to the end of the presentation. I was just getting a battery warning on something.
No worries. So yeah.
So we're at the end. The battery warning is warning itself. Well, Charles, thank you for another excellent presentation. It's, there's no end to the disgraceful actions that these individuals will take. I want to thank our audience for joining us and remind everybody that Crowdsource the Truth is viewer supported, so please go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and become a sponsor. A lot of people have been talking about the information we've been bringing forward about William Barr. I was talking, of course, with Larry Klayman about that, brought it to the attention of Kevin Shipp. Kevin's been digging into a lot of the various CIA things that Barr was involved in. So there's a ton of exclusive programming there on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Earlier this week, I had an interview with Leor Lesser, who's an attorney that's actually filed an FTC complaint against Patreon. And I'm hopeful that the investigation the FTC may begin will reveal some more details about what exactly happened there. I feel pretty strongly that someone's forcing Patreon to remove some of these people who are considered objectionable. Waiting to hear from Laura Loomer as well, who amazingly just got right up on stage. She had a camera with her on Periscope, and she just walks right up on the stage. She's standing up there looking around. If I did that, I'd be tackled and dragged out of there by my ankles. I don't know how she does it, but she made quite a scene.
Good for her.
Good for her. Well, listen, thanks everybody for watching. We'll be back tomorrow. We've got Ole Damagard. We've got our new show with the Moriartys, Unseen Libya. So I hope that people will join patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth to catch all of that exclusive programming. And I hope everybody has a pleasant evening. I'll see everybody tomorrow.